Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Colton Steiner, and thank you for tuning in to the premiere episode of the Siesta Podcast. Now, it probably will be the Siesta Podcast, but I never know. I may change it down the line, so just feel free to take it with a grain of salt that it may not stay, but I thought it was a pretty clever idea for a title of a podcast. Now, this podcast is going to be one of the most laid-back podcasts you will ever listen to. It's just going to be me talking about different topics that come into my mind throughout the week, and aside from the Grinding Gears podcast, which I have with my buddy Sean, and this one, I'm mainly focusing on movies, maybe TV shows, and sports. And sports are going to be main aspect. I would love to have something where I have guests on and have interviews with maybe some athletes, maybe some entertainers of some sort, whether it's actors or musicians, but it's just something I think is fun to do, and maybe that's something I'll bring Sean on to assist with a couple episodes. But I thought this was a fun thing for me to do because I love sports. Sports have been a big thing in my life, and maybe that's something I'll start off by talking about. So if you guys do not know me, my name is Colton Steiner. I reside in Ohio, where I am a big Browns fan. If you do not follow me on Twitter or on Twitch it's at twitch.tv/Colton Steiner, and on Twitter at @S_Colton. But I've been following sports ever since I was a kid. I believe the first sport I ever played was indoor soccer, and then t-ball. And the funny thing is, soccer and baseball were two of the earliest sports that I gave up on because it wasn't where my talents were. And when I look at what the sports I love the most, number one is basketball. I love playing basketball, but the funny thing is, the favorite sport I love to watch the most is football. So that's where my love of the Browns comes in, and my love of Ohio State football. So that's kind of where I am intrigued about this college football playoff thing to start off the very first episode, because I think that's a very good topic that we can have a discussion about, and many people can have arguments about who should get in, who should not, who had the right to get in, who got off easy, stuff like that. But yeah, sports are going to be a very big aspect of this show, and I am very intrigued to see how it goes going forward. And I also like this because it helps me develop my skills in podcasting and on air in live shows. So if I ever want to get a job in broadcasting down the line, just doing this straight through is something that helps me develop a lot more skills in that aspect. And when I look at my skills 4 years ago, when I first started to create content at a professional level, I am incredibly better than what I used to be. So it's fun for me to gain my skills, and hopefully I entertain some of you. Hopefully we can have conversations in the future, whether it's on a podcast or whether it's on Twitter. But aside from that, sports are my life, and also movies. I would say I grew up on Star Wars and sports, and that's something that is kind of where I love, and that's kind of where the second part of today's topic comes with. I want to talk about Star Wars and how the sequels just very were underwhelming for me. And when I look at Star Wars, I think I would say I became a fan in the early 2000s, maybe I'm pushing it by saying late 1999, but I would say at least 2000 to 2001 was when I started getting into Star Wars folklore and stuff like that, even though I was only 5 or 6, which blows my mind still, because I remember one of my earliest memories of watching a movie in theater was watching Attack of the Clones. And the ironic thing, I love that when I watch that and the action scenes, it's my least favorite Star Wars movie. Well, one of my least favorites, and my least favorite is The Last Jedi, which I will talk about later on. But man, Star Wars for sure has been one of the things that I love to talk about, and we'll go on and about that later in the episode. But yeah, so far, sports, Star Wars, that's me. and Marvel over the last 10 years has become something I have just become, I wouldn't say obsessed with, but just absolutely focused on, and pretty much fandom of that I've been just admired what different directors and different actors have been able to do over the last 10 years. And Robert Downey Jr., what his rise to fame with this MCU, and just in any acting role in general, he's been just an incredible actor. And yeah, so I will say this, I think I started talking about it on the very beginning of the show, but my skills in this are very limited. I think about stuff as I talk about it. I'm not that fluid, and I kind of want to get better at that. So that's why I'm creating this Siesta podcast, where it's a party for all and a party for one, and while I'm still learning it all. So hopefully you guys are going to enjoy this. So I want to talk about the college football playoff. So the college football playoff, they picked their Final Four after the incredibly hard 2020 season. This has to be one of the most difficult seasons in the last 100 years by far. By far, I mean, trying to put it into play. It was such a hard thing to incorporate because you had different conferences with different start times. And aside from the ACC, SEC, and the Big 12, the other two Power 5 schools didn't start until the end of October and then in November. So those are where I'm going to get this out of the way. I'm an Ohio State fan. I absolutely hate what Kevin Warren did this season. Every aspect that the Big Ten went down, it was the wrong decision from the very beginning. And I want to start off by saying this. The first decision to postpone the season after releasing the schedule was the start of the downfall. And you could kind of see it. They didn't know what they were doing. And I said this on Twitch during a live stream, and I don't know why it's so hard for these conferences to discuss, okay, what are these plans that we are gonna implement? What are we gonna do if a COVID test comes alive and we have to postpone a game? Well, no one knows when this thing's going to get over. And I don't get the benefit of, okay, we're going to postpone the season to the spring. I don't get the thought of how that was possible. And then you have to go into the next year. Urban Meyer said, great, you can't have these guys play 12 games in not 24 games in 1 year. That's just way too much wear down on these college athletes. And I think it's a big thing to remember that the Big Ten tried every aspect to go their own way and try and look fancy. They tried to be the professional people, like, oh, we handled this the best way. Well, in reality, they handled it in the worst way possible. I would like to applaud and congratulate the ACC, the Big 12, and the SEC on how well they handled this whole pandemic situation during the college football season. Every school in those conferences did their very best to have a great season for these college athletes and have the most normal season during a crazy time. And I don't know why it was so difficult for the Big Ten to contact these schools and say, hey, what are your guys' plans, scenarios that you're going to run in case one of these like COVID tests pops up? I don't know if they ever talk to these other conferences, because trying to get a collaborative decision for these things to go well was just not good. I don't know why the Big Ten was led by Kevin Warren, and I really hope he does not come back, does not return as the Big Ten commissioner, because in my opinion, he is the most hated commissioner in college football, in college sports. I don't see him leading the Big Ten well in the coming future. When all these other conferences were able to handle this situation a lot more professionally than you, and you were not able to perform a great, a doable season when the best team in your conference only played 5 regular season games and 6 games total, that is on you. You can't put that on the team. That is on the Big Ten commissioner, Kevin Warren. I'm going to repeat that name so everyone makes it loud and clear. So, aside from the fact that Ohio State only played 6 games total, I still think they were one of the best teams in college football by far. And when the coaches released their top 10, of course, the almighty Dabo Swinney refused to put Ohio State in his top 10, put Coastal Carolina and a 3-loss Florida team over an Ohio State team. Now, you can have the top 5, whatever you be. Nick Saban put Ohio State at 5 in his and had Texas A&M in the top 4 over Ohio State, which I fully respect. I can totally understand that. But to have Ohio State at number 11 and it just blows my mind. They played 2 top 25 teams with Indiana and Northwestern, and you do not put them in. I don't understand that at all. You must have such a burr up your butt about a team in order to put them out of the top 10. And in my opinion, that's a stupid decision by Dabo Swinney, because one, that gives the team you're playing bulletin board material to come into with like a thing to fight for coming into a bowl game. And they're playing your team. So they have an edge. But so I kind of like it in that sense. Now our guys are going to come in fighting and feisty. So, but the college football playoff, the top 10, the top 4. Let me lay them out for you. Number 1 was Alabama. Everyone knew this was like a 100% chance they were going to get the 1 spot. It wasn't controversial at all. Clemson, not pretty much the same thing at 2. No one saw it any other way. They came in with a number 2 spot. Number 3 was Ohio State. Now, everyone could understand this from the aspect that Clemson and Notre Dame, who was the 4th team in the college football playoff, have already played twice this season. So the fact that if you put Notre Dame ahead of Ohio State at 3, that would mean 3 times this year Clemson and Notre Dame would have played. And I don't think that's a fun thing for anybody. Ever let us play someone else when you've already played like a 25% of your season against one team. No, nobody's here for that. So I completely understand. While Ohio State was the only team that could have been exempt out of the top 4, I can understand why they put them at 3 and not 4. And put Notre Dame at 4. So Texas A&M was the one that got left out. And this is where it comes to winning a conference championship. Every year we say a conference champion should get in over a team that didn't play in their conference championship. And that's a fair argument. But this year is different. So Texas A&M played almost twice as many games as Ohio State. And this was the biggest concern I had as a Buckeye fan coming into Sunday. I did not know whether or not the 6 games played effect of whether Ohio State would make it in the top 4. And you kind of have to look at it through the entire season. So everyone knew Ohio State was going to have a shorter season. And after their game against Michigan got canceled, it was confirmed that they were only going to play 6 games. And the College Football Playoff Committee still had Ohio State in the top 4, which made me more confident coming into Sunday when they were going to announce the decision on who the top 4 were. Because I didn't think, even if Ohio State won against Northwestern, I don't know what they would have to do to get knocked out, because they were playing a ranked team and they were playing in a conference championship, unlike Texas A&M, who was just playing Tennessee. So this is one of those things where you can kind of see it happening, but it's hard not to have an argument against it, because Texas A&M beat Tennessee pretty handily and came into the game with a pretty much an edge. And I can understand the frustration. I mean, I'm not going to say Ohio State, we're a great team, we deserve to get in. Did we deserve to get in? I really don't know. We only played 6 games, and that comes back to the Big Ten commissioner and the Big Ten committee that failed at the very beginning of the season. And you can say, Ohio State shouldn't have been able to get in. I mean, maybe not, but you can't blame Ohio State for just playing their schedule. And as crazy of a year as it was, you can put the blame on the Big Ten Conference that is led by the inept Kevin Warren, who at the very beginning of this season, I don't understand when they announced they were bringing back the Big Ten Conference. I don't know why we didn't announce that we were going to start it in October, early October. I'm talking about what was it? Was it October 12th? I believe around that date was when people were saying they might start, but it was poorly handled. It was October 10th, my bad. But it just blows my mind how poorly handled this situation was by the Big Ten. And fortunately, Ohio State was able to get out and play their season. And it was a shame not to see Ohio State Michigan this year. And it makes you wonder whether Michigan actually had cases of COVID or whether they were just done with the season, because they did end up saying we aren't going to play in a bowl game, and whether they were going to play in a bowl game or not is, most likely to be true, but still, the fact that they said we're not going to play in a bowl game immediately after canceling their game with Ohio State, you can say your conspiracy theories, but I'm sure they were just done with the season, considering how poorly it was up until the Ohio State game. Actually, even before the Ohio State game. So you can say what it is. College football playoff. We have a great January 1st games with Alabama and Notre Dame. That's going to be a fun one. Notre Dame, coming off a horrible loss against Clemson, has a little bit of something to show for. They're like, we may be the worst of the top 4 teams, but you know what? We're going to go out there and fight. We're going to try and beat Bama. And I swear, if by some miracle of God that Notre Dame beats Alabama, I'll be incredibly shocked. But never underestimate anybody. I say this so many times. On any given day, any team can beat anybody. So even a David versus a Goliath, David may come out on top. So yeah, then we got Clemson and Ohio State on the evening game on that day. So a revenge game for sure. Ohio State coming in with an edge with their with Dabo's leaving them out of the top 10. So hey, if I'm a Buckeye coach, I'm putting that on a bulletin board, and actually I'm putting it on the door before they go out of the locker room. This is what this coach thinks of you. Go and prove him wrong. So that's what my thoughts are on the college football playoff. And if you guys ever want to share your thoughts, just let me know on Twitter at @_Colton or Instagram, because I'll definitely hope to try and post this stuff there. I don't know what that handle will be yet, as it is not created, but it is what it is. So moving on from that, I want to talk about Star Wars, actually. And it was over a couple days ago was the reunion of The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens as well. And I want to start off by saying this. I love Star Wars, and I'm glad they brought back the sequels. But the biggest problem I had was they did it so poorly. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy watching The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker. I can sit down and watch it, but if you're going to tell me that they're better than the originals, I just laugh at that. The originals are the GOAT. You can watch the originals, and just no matter how many times, it's still as good as the first time. It just blows my mind how George Lucas was able to captivate a story that was so well put together in 3 movies. And what I loved about that, and this will go on to talk about my dislikes about the next one, each movie kind of led into the next one. So with as good as A New Hope was, it's still kind of, Darth Vader was still alive. He was still out there. And then it was able to lead into Empire Strikes Back. And then the events of Empire Strikes Back led into Return of the Jedi. So you see how great one movie leads to another. Now, when I talk about the sequels, what I despised about them, none of them really led into the other. Everything kind of was like, oh, holly jolly, we're all good. It's everything going to work out in the end. No, at the end of A New Hope, Darth Vader was still alive. He was still floating out there. He was still a big threat. And with Luke just now learning to become a Jedi, maybe he's getting a little too cocky. So that's when he's on Empire Strikes Back, he's like, hey, I can face Vader. I got to go save my friends rather than finish my training. And then Han Solo at the end of Empire Strikes Back is in Carbonite, and yeah, they got to go rescue him. So it leaves you with a cliffhanger. In this one, there was no cliffhanger in the sequels, and my biggest disdain and my biggest complaint about The Last Jedi is they tried getting too mushy-gushy with it. And I don't want to hear, oh, you just didn't want him to try anything new. No, I would have liked to see him try something new. But the storytelling, the whole Canto Pite scenes were just so egregious and so useless, in my opinion, that the actor that came on that we got from the Canto Pite scene was practically useless. The entire plan was useless because Holdo wouldn't tell him anything. Like, even if he's a commander or a captain, the fact that she didn't tell him, oh, we're just going to wait till, we're going to send us all in pods. No, if everyone's just sitting there waiting for something to happen, like, oh, we're going to die. Okay. I'm not going to try and do anything about it. We're just going to sit here. That's fine. That's my biggest complaint, is everything was avoidable. And when I look at like the action, lightsaber fight with Kylo Ren and Rey was awesome. When Kylo Ren was able to kill Snoke, I did not see that coming. I was blown away. That was a great scene. And the Holdo scene where they blew through an entire spaceship with going to light speed was brilliant. I thought that was amazing. And the cinematic, the silence. People don't realize silence is like music. It has its own aspect. So whenever they had no sound, everything was silent, and then it comes at you. That was cool. Those two scenes were really the only thing I liked. And the biggest thing that we came into the Last Jedi with was Rey was going to find Luke. And Luke is this old hermit who is, for one, tried to kill Ben Solo for having a little bit of dark side in him. This is not Luke's character at all. It never was. When you go back and look at the original trilogy, I don't understand why they went this route, because his entire premise in Return of the Jedi was, I'm not going to kill Darth Vader. I'm not going to let, there's still good in him. The one little ounce of bad in Ben Solo, and Luke Skywalker is about to kill his own nephew. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And that has to be by far my biggest complaint, is that they ruined Luke. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't have minded if one of Luke's students turned up and overthrew his Jedi Padawans. Like, that would make sense. But the whole aspect that Luke was the problem for it just doesn't sit well with me. And I don't know why Rian Johnson decided to go that route, because he could have had many other things happen. But instead, they decided to go a route that I just did not like at all. So aside from the Canto Bight scene, I did not like any of that. Pretty much useless, and pretty much a social justice warrior crowd towards in Star Wars that doesn't really move the plot at all. And going from that to Holdo's scene was not her plan to not tell anybody what the plan was going to be. It made no sense at all, when the entire Star Wars trilogy is based on people putting together a plan to beat in this trilogy, the First Order, and it just didn't sit well with me. None of it did. And if you like The Last Jedi, go for it. I'm just saying, the more I watch it, the more it pisses me off because of how poorly it was put together. And the fact that I don't think any of the directors, J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson, worked together on this to create a good story. And coming out of The Force Awakens 2 was the whole question of who's Rey's parents, and they lead you on through 3 movies about it. And by the time you're in The Rise of Skywalker, it's like, okay, we really don't care. Just if you tell us, we'll be shocked. Like, they say it's Palpatine. I'm like, okay. I wasn't thrown away like I was in like Empire Strikes Back. Like, give us something good. Don't try and just, we're gonna make this a big reveal. No, it really wasn't. And I think that's, as I go back to, the directors not working together. So, man, so there was so much wrong with this movie, and it could have been so good. I mean, I was so anticipated for this movie, and there was a lot of hype and a lot of enjoyment coming out of the movie. But the more I thought about it, I was like, this movie really kind of sucks. And maybe going back to Holdo's plan, maybe there was a mole in the Republic, or whatever their rebellion or whatever their group is called in this one. But it just, the fact that she didn't tell anybody but kept it into the main crew, it doesn't make sense. I mean, it just it's all kind of bad. And the fact that I would have liked them to give Carrie Fisher, may she rest in peace, some closure in this one. Like, Ben Solo gonna fire, almost pulls the trigger, but restrains himself. Then he sees one of his other TIE fighters shoot it and blow it up. Then she dies. That would have given Ben Solo more hate towards the First Order than to the Rebellion. Because, like, man, they killed my mom. My mom, I really loved her. I mean, and then she survives that, and that doesn't make any sense, even though she was in space for like 10 minutes. Like, can we survive just floating out in space now? That really doesn't make any sense logically. Like, if that's the case, then everyone can just go out and just float around in space. But yeah, there was a lot that I had a problem with in this movie, and hopefully they make some good movies down the line, and the Mandalorian series was a great step forward. I mean, what those directors did, and that's where I'm saying we're directors working together to create a great piece of content, and we saw what happened. In my opinion, the Mandalorian Season 2 was so much better than Season 1, and I loved Season 1 too. But yeah, this was a shorter episode. Since it's only me talking, I can only talk about half an hour before I start blabbing on about random stuff. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you want to follow me on Twitter, go follow me there at @S_Colton, and on Instagram at @S_Colton too. So thank you guys for listening. I hopefully will have this up on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and various other platforms. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.